Kyle, you're the perfect person to talk to here. You have flashed warning signals that China is ratcheting toward a potential conflict with Taiwan. How closely is Chinese leader Xi Jinping watching this buildup? I mean, some would say tying up of U.S. military assets in the Caribbean.
Sure. Well, great to be here, Liz. I think that, the geopolitical calculus of everyone on the world stage is kind of it's at its highest level, I think, since I've been alive. As far as we have a conflict, we have a land war in Europe. We have a potential conflict coming in Taiwan, which I think is inevitable, given Xi Jinping's rhetoric since 2017. And now we have, the United States finally properly handling the situation in the Southern Caribbean with Venezuela and I think soon to be Mexico.
So what do you make of what's going on inside Xi Jinping's mind as he watches this military buildup very far from the South China Sea and Taiwan? And we bring this up because we all remember the Sochi Olympics, when that was the moment where Vladimir Putin thought, oh, everybody's, distracted with the Olympics. And that's when Russia snapped off the Crimea from Ukraine.
Yeah, I mean, look, we have a third of our Navy in the Caribbean today, and to motor our ships out to the South China Sea is going to take a while from here. We're at a moment in time in which China itself, if you look at their economic situation, you saw their public real estate developer market collapse again last week after they've tried to prop it up with state-owned companies for the last couple of years. Economic gravity ends up taking over. You can't just make it up forever. They're in the middle of a real estate crisis, a banking crisis, and a youth unemployment crisis. And so Xi needs to change the narrative, and changing the narrative would be moving on Taiwan sooner rather than later. I hope that doesn't happen. But Liz, your point is well taken. The multi-war front that we're facing today is maybe the perfect time for Xi to move sooner rather than later.
I mean, you think he's going to do something like that? And by the way, the United States is selling military might, certainly to Taiwan, $700 million protective measures when it comes to, anti-missile defenses, things like that. That's happening right now.
Yeah, I mean, okay, look, Taiwan isn't quite ready yet, right? We are trying to help them as much as we can, militarily speaking. It's just going to take time. When you look at how we are spread out from a precision weapons perspective, when you look at what President Trump and Secretary Hegseth and Secretary Feinberg have been doing with their teams, is they're really focusing with the big, beautiful bill on any strategic deficiencies the U.S. has, and they're doing an amazing job at applying capital where it must be applied. It's a quasi Manhattan Project going on with the public-private partnerships right now.
Yeah.
And they're doing it at warp speed, and they're doing it properly for the U.S. taxpayer. And I'm a huge fan of what's going on right now. We just need to do it as quickly as possible, Liz, to prevent this kind of situation from happening.
It's almost as if China is, am I right about this, on its back foot economically? I mean, they certainly pound a very loud and large war drum, but if you start digging into what's happening with their property situation and the unemployment rate there, what's not working there that may prevent them from taking, nefarious action?
Well, I mean, you and I both know communism has actually never really worked.
Yep.
And they started to westernize in 2002, and they really went the other way in 2014, 2015, and they have closed up. They still have a closed capital account. They've never recapitalized their banks, Liz, and they've got a demographic problem that is actually collapsing in front of them. So it looks a lot like Japan did going in to the late 1980s from a demographic perspective. So we've got, I think China's got, their work cut out for them. They're still, if we take their word for it, they're an $18 trillion economy. We're a $30 trillion economy. Russia's a $2 trillion economy. I mean, in the end, what America does best is we end up putting ourselves together and doing the right thing and I guess shoring up our weaknesses. And that's what we're doing now. We've had several years of major weakness with, the open borders and not applying capital where it needed to be applied. And the current administration is certainly applying it where it needs to be applied and closing our borders and getting things done properly. We're only a year in, Liz. We're working at warp speed right now.
Something happened in the markets yesterday out of the Asian region. It wasn't China, it was Japan. There is the belief, and I believe the Bank of Japan's central banker had said, you know what, we may tighten rates, we may increase interest rates coming at least sometime this month. And immediately, bond yields in China, these JGBs, Japanese government bonds, skyrocketed to the highest since 2008. The yen started to move higher and against the U.S. dollar. And so to me, I thought, OK, well, this is kind of far away. It's not, because our markets dove yesterday, in part because of that concern that would suck U.S. investment into higher yielding Japan bonds. Are you concerned about all of this?
Yeah, I'm not. And I think the reason is, Liz, when you look at Japanese yield curve, what the U.S. just did in the last 4.5 years, 5 years, was we exported about 50% inflation. You heard President Trump talking earlier today about the worst inflation potentially of all time. And I see it that way. Realize like the Fed's balance sheet has never been over $1 trillion until 2009. And between 2019 and 2023, it went from $4.5 trillion to $9 trillion. So we went from $1 trillion to $9 trillion on the Fed's balance sheet in a relatively short period of time in the time continuum of the world. We exported a ton of inflation, dollar inflation, to the rest of the world. Japanese rates were pegged at zero, and some were below zero, all the way out to their 10-year. They're letting their 30-year flop, but there's not a lot of bonds out there on the 30-year. So I think paying attention to 0 to 10 years is important. And imagine if your rates were somewhere between 0 and 0.1%, and you got hit with 50% inflation. That's why the yen went from 100 to 160. So the Japanese people lost 60% of their buying power in dollars. Well, either the rates have to move or the yen has to move. Japan's in an intractable situation.
Speaking of central bankers, just a few minutes ago at the White House in the Roosevelt Room, President Trump was welcoming the crowd of people to talk about the Trump accounts for newborn American children that will invest in all kinds of index funds, et cetera. And as he was introducing Kevin Hassett, of course, the big economic advisor for the president, he said, and here's Kevin Hassett, the potential new Fed chair. So there are 5 people that Scott Bessent, the Treasury Secretary, who's in charge of the interviewing process, 5 people who are in this final race to be the next Fed chair when Jay Powell steps down next May. Michelle Bowman, Christopher Waller, Kevin Hassett, Kevin Warsh, Rick Rieder. You think it's Kevin Hassett or somebody else?
Yeah, look, by the way, I have great relationships with several of those people, and I think they're all fantastic choices. Well, almost all of them are fantastic. We won't go there. But I think that choosing Kevin Hassett, to me, would be the natural move of President Trump, because he wants someone that is a great economist and someone that he trusts. And he certainly spends a lot of time with Kevin, and Kevin's a great economist. And I think he'd certainly fill that role out perfectly. Rick Rieder and Waller are both also amazing choices. It's just who does he really want to be in the position, and who does he trust? And I think he's narrowed it down to some great candidates. Well,
he said right now on the wires, Trump sees Fed chair pick early next year. So we may have to wait for the big reveal, but we'll be watching to see if you're right. Kyle, great to have you. Thank you so much.
Great to be here. Thank you.
Kyle Bass.